Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. And today we are talking about everyone's favorite Tier 10 Japanese heavy cruiser, the ZAL. Now, the title of this video is probably something along the lines of, does it really need more buffs, or something like that. I haven't really decided what I'm going to call this video just yet. But the ZAL, as we all know, was a subject of much debate during the whole fiasco that happened during August, talking about how the devs don't listen to the player base, and one of the biggest complaints of the player base is that, at this time at least, was that ZAL needed to be buffed. And ZAL got buffed. Twice, in fact. They increased her HP back to what the original ZAL's HP was. Now, when I'm talking about the previous ZAL, I'm talking about ZAL. I'm not talking about the alpha test and closed beta test version of the ship called the Sinjo. I think I said that correctly. That ship was kind of nutty. It had, I believe, at one point like an 8-second reload and I believe 48,000 HP, along with the, I think they were 12 or 20 kilometer torpedoes that she could easily stealth fire. And then, of course, there's a stealth firing ZAL, which is a whole nother thing in and of itself, and then one of the reasons why her health was nerfed in the first place. But anyway, if you don't know the ZAL's HP, quick history of it is it was nerfed once just before the game went into, I believe, open beta testing. Then it was nerfed again down to 40,800 in 5.2. But then recently her health was increased by 2,000 HP in 10.10, and then another 2,100 HP in 10.11, to where now ZAL is back at her original health pool of 44,900. And that's the ZAL that we have in game, the version that I'm playing in the background for this video. Now, many players still say this isn't enough and that she needs to be buffed even further by at least another, if you go off of some players' comments, of course, some players want, the ship to have almost super cruiser levels of health. Some say another 10,000, some say another 2,000, so forth and so on. So we're going to look at the ZAL today and ask the question, does it really need more buffs or not? So, the ZAL in and of itself, we're talking mostly about the survivability in terms of buffs. In terms of the damage output of the ship, I don't think the ship needs to be touched in terms of gun range, reload time, torpedo range, torpedo reload time, anything like that at all. Damage output, the ZAL is still an absolute beast at putting down damage. Now, a lot of that damage, the usefulness of that damage depends upon, of course, how you play the ZAL. You can play the ZAL like most farmers do and sit in the back, use the ship's excellent gun dispersion, excellent HE alpha, excellent fire chance to just farm damage off of battleships all game. The ship is very, very, very good at that. Most of the Japanese cruisers are. Their guns, up until the British heavy cruisers came around, had the best HE alpha usually at their tier. And ZAL's, of course, no exception to that. Right now, with the build that I'm running on my ZAL, which you should have seen my command build at the beginning of this video, I guess I'll throw it up right here too. She has, at this moment, a 22% chance of causing a fire on the target per shell on guns that reload in 13.7 seconds, pre-adrenaline rush, and the HE does a maximum alpha of 3,400. Pretty darn good guns just there on those two stats alone, talking about the characteristics of the shell. Not to mention that the guns can, of course, pin 34 millimeters of armor because they are 203s, and the velocity out the tubes is 920 meters a second. So you have very fast, very accurate guns. The ZAL has a maximum dispersion of 145 meters. That's very, 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 very good, and I'm sure, as you can see in the game behind you, the guns are phenomenally accurate. Even though my aim isn't the best, the shells do go where I aim, be it in the proper place or be it a little off to the left or to the right. The shells go there. This is one of the cruisers that, hey, I want to hit, let's say, the 4th secondary mount on the side of the ship. You can aim there and the shells will go there. On top of that, too, her AP's no slouch either. Now, the pin angles aren't that great, but if you do catch a flat broadside in the ZAL, AP is a pretty solid option. The AP does a maximum damage of 5,400, that's of course with Citadel damage, and comes out the tubes again at 920 meters a second with the same accuracy as the HE shells, of course. So you have very accurate AP that when ships show you broadside, if you know the weak part of these ships, except for, of course, battleships or well-armored battleships, you can Citadel other cruisers incredibly easily and even delete them outright, because you have 12 230 millimeter guns that reload in 13.7 seconds base. So gun output, Zhao has amazing guns, lovely guns. I love the guns in this ship, and she's great. She's absolutely great with them. Now, torpedoes too. You do have two sets of torps that you can choose between. You have the F3s that are only out to 8 kilometers, but then you can take the Type 93 torpedoes that go out to 12 kilometers. I wouldn't really use the F3 torpedoes. Zhao's not the best close-range ship in the game, but if you want to be extra spicy, go for it. The Type 93s have been the better ones for my experience with the Zhao. They're out to a 12-kilometer range. They do 23,767 maximum damage. So it's great for if there's a gap that you think either the destroyer or a cruiser or battleship might be pushing through. You throw them down there, and you'll be surprised how many times these torpedoes come in handy and snag a hit or two. And of course, eating any torpedoes are going to wreck your day, let alone the Type 93s that can do 23,767 damage to your ship. They're detectable from 1.7 kilometers away, and they move at 67 knots. They reload at 171 seconds. It's a great ship with these torpedoes and the guns when there's a push that's pushing into your Zhao on your flank. It's a fantastic ship for kiting. With these torpedoes and the guns and the fire rate and all that, pushing into a Zhao can be a very painful experience for anybody. In terms of maneuverability, the Zhao gets very high marks here as well. You can get the ship up to 36.2 knots with the speed flag. She has an 840 meter turning circle, so a pretty wide turning circle, but not Soviet cruiser wide, and a base rudder shift time of 6.1 seconds. That is base without any mods on.
Sometimes my genius it's almost frightening.
If you want to, you can put the 2 rudder mods on, and then you can have an absolutely just nutty Zhao at that point. I do have 1 rudder mod on my Zhao currently, but if I were to slap on steering gears mod 2, you would have a 3.7 second rudder shift time in the Zhao. That is insane on a heavy cruiser with the firepower that the Zhao has. Now, I do have 6.1 seconds with the first rudder mod on, which, as you can see, the ship dances around like crazy. So she's a great ship for staying at mid-range or even long range and just moving around and not stopping and basically keeping your foot down on the gas and dodging shots. Her concealment's also another highlight here. With the mod and the commander skill, you get your detectability down to 9.9 kilometers on a heavy cruiser with 12 203mm guns. Now, again, is a ship the best knife fighter? No, it's not a very good ship for getting in close. But a 9.9 kilometer detection range means that you absolutely get to dictate who you do and who you do not want to engage. That is a phenomenal plus to have on the Zhao, on any ship, being able to dictate when you do and do not want to be spotted. Of course, now radar is another issue, but of course, if you memorize the radar ships and their range, you just stay outside of their range, because this is not a slow ship. It can definitely keep its distance from any radar ship that it wants to. So it's a good ship in all these categories. So why are players still saying the ship needs to be buffed? Well, we come to what used to be a very good thing about the Zhao, and that's her armor. So this is definitely the armor of a bygone era. And if you want to feel like you've slipped into the Twilight Zone, go type in Zhao OP on Google and go read the old forum posts, the old Reddit posts from back in the day. So Zhao has a 30mm upper belt and a 30mm torpedo belt, all up and down its sides. You know what was impossible to overmatch back before the Conqueror was introduced, except for one other battleship? I'll give you a second. 30mm side plating on cruisers. 30mm cannot at the time of Up Until the Conqueror being released, could not be overmatched by any battleship in the game except for the Yamato. The Montana couldn't do it. The Grosse first couldn't do it. Not until the Conqueror with her 457s got added did you have the ability to overmatch 30 millimeters of armor on any other battleship except for the Yamato. You know what we have a lot of at Tier 10 now? If you guess calibers that can overmatch 30 millimeters of armor on cruisers, you'd be correct. The Republic can do it. The Thunderer can do it. If you actually add up, and I think I mentioned this before sometime last week, all the 457 millimeter, or well, ships capable of overmatching 30, because Republic can do it too. Right now, with the ships that we have out in game and the ones coming out, there are just as many ships that can overmatch 30 millimeters of armor as those that cannot. So we've gone from having one ship that could do it, one battleship at Tier 10 that could do it, to now I believe it's like 6 and 6, something like that, because there's Thunderer, Shikishima, Miami, the Republic, then we're getting the Prussian, the Incomparable, and then you add up the other ones, so the Colombo, the Burgon, the Montana, so forth and so on. I think it's about 6 and 6 right now. So this old armor scheme, which used to be amazing at Tier 10 and warranted Zal's health being nerfed down to 40,000, is now extremely outdated and a huge liability, because now all these 457mm or Republic 431 caliber guns can go right through that. It doesn't care because it overmatches the armor. So Zal's gone from being a ship that was extremely maneuverable, extremely stealthy, that when it could get hit, a very attentive Zal captain could whip his ship around with his 3.7 second rudder shift time and bounce that off of his belt like he didn't care, to now it's going to go straight through that and go into your weirdly shaped citadel and go right through it. Now, granted, Zal's citadel armor is actually not that bad either. It's got a freaking 65 millimeter sloped belt. Slope. That's nothing to laugh at. But granted, when you have an 18-inch shell going through your side into the roof, which is only 55 millimeters, that's going to hurt. But the Zal's still incredibly stealthy. It's got all those pluses that we just went over, the amazing firepower, the good torpedoes, the amazing rudder shift time. Even if you only build into it with one module, it's freaking good. You build into two modules, it's even better. So it's got all that going for it. The only thing that it's really got going against it, which is a really, 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 really big thing, is its outdated armor scheme. Now, my question to you guys is, looking back on it, does Zal need more buffs? Does it really need it? Or does what it have at the moment, if you're aware of what you're playing and play accordingly, is that enough to get by? Now, I haven't had much trouble in Zal since the buffs. It's nice to have another 4,000 HP. It's not exactly enough HP to eat another Citadel, but I mean, really, do you want cruisers that can eat multiple Citadel shots and continue to really be fine? I mean, ideally in cruisers, if you're eating Citadel shots, you're doing something wrong. But then again, Zal's outdated armor scheme could certainly contribute to that. Or does it just need some more hit points? Me personally, I think if we get back to closed alpha test Zal, the Xinjiang, whatever it was, maybe that 48,000 hit point range, I think that might be a little bit excessive. Maybe 46 would be a nice middle ground for the time being. Or if they want to get really spicy, they could buff the armor plate a little bit to where it can't be overmatched by 457mm guns. Maybe. That would certainly help the long-term survivability of the Zal, but I do think it would have to be one or the other. Either give it another 2,000 hit points, or buff the armor and don't change either. Or like say they buff it to, 31, or whatever is needed to bounce 457. I think it's like 31 point something, so it'd have to be 32, which would be a pretty freaking tough upper belt on a tier 10 cruiser now at that point. and they may have to warrant nerfing the ship at that point. But hey, if your ship can rely on your armor, and you know how to angle your armor, or you know what you can and can't do with your armor, that should be enough to get you by. Or you could give it another 2,000 hit points and call it a day at 46,000 health and change for the Zao. So that's the big question today. I just went on a little trail of digging into the Zao's history and looking at how the ship has performed in the past, so forth and so on. So again, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. We're at 35,000 subs, just passed 32,000 a few days ago. I cannot thank you guys enough for that. Hope you guys have a wonderful Tuesday. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.